Welcome to the seminar on Innovation for Resilience and Inclusive Development, organized by the Stockholm Environment Institute, the Research Institutes of Sweden, RISE, and LM International. My name is Carina Barquet.
I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the Stockholm Environment Institute, SEI. And this seminar that we're talking about today is an event based on a project that we're running called Swash and Grow, about scaling off-grid wash innovations, water and sanitation. And it's funded by Vinnova, the Swedish innovation agency, and we have with us 28 partners pretty much from all over the world, including Europe, Africa, Middle East, and Latin America. And basically the aim of this project that we're building upon today is to strengthen innovation systems, let's say, about off-grid water and sanitation solutions predominantly. And we're trying to develop tools that helps innovative companies on the one hand to work with aid organizations to bring solutions to the market that are more circular, inclusive and sustainable and can help people in dire need of these kinds of basic services. Now, as I'm sure you'll all agree with me, if there's something that's enabling for sustainable development, it's clean energy, clean water and clean sanitation. And if you look around you, how these services are provided in sort of advanced economies, it's typically through large-scale infrastructure networks in the form of power grids, in the form of sewage systems, in the form of water pipes running throughout our environments. These are obviously incredibly important in providing hugely important beneficial services for society and for people, but they're also very capital intensive to set up. It's very complicated to establish even in advanced economies. And of course, even more so if you're in emerging economies, and especially if these are recovering from conflicts or suffering from weak institutions. And but still, as we can see from these sobering numbers, we have a dire need globally to improve access to these kinds of basic services, especially if we want to if we actually take the 2030 agenda seriously. And that also means that there's a need to develop and deploy alternatives to power lines and sewage systems, especially in the short time scale that we have up until 2030. But therefore, it's very positive and important to see that we see very promising development in innovation and deployment around more gridless solutions that can be smaller in scale, less reliant on a large infrastructure, and can be deployed closer to the actual user. And what I'm talking about here is, for example, on-site sanitation systems. We're talking about mini-grids or micro-grids based on solar, PV and batteries. We're talking about solar water pumps, for example. These require smaller batches of capital. They can provide resilience benefits as they are deployed decentralized. And they can also open up more opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises, because typically in these kinds of water and energy sectors, they tend to be very much dominated by large players and large utilities. Typically very difficult for SMEs to come into those. So there are opportunities. There are lots of interesting things that are happening, as we'll hear more about today, but things are really happening too slowly. And this is especially so in fragile context where communities are going through or recovering from conflicts or natural disasters or sometimes even both, as I'm sure Carina can go more into.
Thanks, Gulle. Probably many of you sitting here know that over 180 million people are currently targeted by humanitarian assistance, usually as a result of displacement or by natural hazards or conflict. That's over 1% of the global population, and this was before Ukraine. Nearly half of these were children. This is not happening in a void. There are several multipliers adding pressures to already extreme vulnerable situations. Climate-related disastrous events are becoming more frequent and unpredictable. Many of the extreme events experienced during the past 2 years occurred one after the other, leaving very little time for recovery from one shock to the next. And these events are not only contributing to displacement, they are also triggering cascading effects even beyond their location and with far-reaching implications. For example, displacement is adding pressure to existing urbanized areas, many of which have from the beginning bad enough water and sanitation systems. So this is adding additional pressure to already pressured cities. Recent events have put water and sanitation systems on the spotlight. The COVID-19 pandemic reminded us of the importance of access to water and sanitation, but also of the fragility of the systems. Globally, most water and sanitation providers experience ruptures in supply chains, interruptions in services, and a decline in the quality of response due to restricted or no movement of utility staff. Something as simple as washing hands exerted pressure to our systems, not just because we needed more water, but also because of an unexpected increase in the substances released to the treatment utilities. The situation in Ukraine is highlighting the importance of ensuring infrastructure redundancy beyond centralized networks. This means we need to have backup systems or additional systems that can be activated in case of failure. Beyond humanitarian assistance and climate change, globally, whether in Nyköping or Nairobi, we are facing an era of aging infrastructure that is demanding massive and rapid investments in the coming decade. The demand in this renewal or in the expansion of critical utilities is once again not happening in a void. The new economies of scale, coupled with our lifestyles, are defining the ways in which we relate to, the ways we use, but also the ways we pay for our infrastructures. Now, if there's a lesson to take home from the developments in the energy sector, is that these changes are increasingly favoring granularity, which means build more rather than build larger. While we have not really seen the same paradigm happening in the water sector, I think we are in a unique time in history where a change in how we design utilities is actually no longer a choice. And now, if you don't agree, think about this. How about an increasingly unpredictable climate with more extreme floods and droughts, power lines affected by storms and fires, combined with dinosaur-old infrastructure and increased demand? The discussion today will focus precisely on questions related to infrastructure diversification, the role of the private sector in system decentralization, and the potential that decentralized networks can provide for SMEs and the private sector. And with this, I would like to introduce you to today's moderators, Sten Stenbeck, Senior Project Manager at Rice Institute of Sweden.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carina and Olle. That was very interesting introduction on facts and figures. May I just to be clear on the term, for instance, we can start with resilience. How would you define what is resilience?
Well, resilience is basically the capability of any given system to recover from a shock, adapt or recover from a shock. So you can think of it as the quicker a system come back to sort of normal operation or decent operations after a shock, the better the resilience.
Very good, very good. Because that's the theme today. Another question is now also just to see, you have used the word, a notion gridless. We will also use the notion off-grid or decentralized systems. What would you say? You have already mentioned it, but just to say that, how would you define those?
Well, it's super difficult. There aren't any clear academic definitions here, I'd say. But
No.
Just sort of verging to if you look at the spectrum from something that's very centralized and very dependent on large assets, something that's maybe very independent of any infrastructure, and there's a spectrum in between. And we're talking more about this side of the spectrum.
Yeah. So in the electricity area and the power area, you can see either you have a big electric grid or you have a solar home system with. But you could also have that in the water and sanitation. And
yeah, exactly. The systems are the same, even if the grid terminology is typically more applied in electricity sector context.
Very good, very good. And when you talk about these kind of off-grid solutions, and so who are the ones developing these innovations? What sector is who are doing this in the development?
Yeah, well, obviously it's being deployed by all kinds of organizations, be it private companies and NGOs and whatever, often in partnerships, I guess, as well. But obviously the actual technological development often typically takes place within the private sector.
Yeah. So the private sector is actually play a key role, I would say. I also now would like to invite the panel we have. Thank you so much. A big applause for those guys. And they will leave the stage, and I'll welcome the panel. And while the panel is now entering the stage, I would like to use some minutes to talk a little bit more on the private sector involvement in the SDGs. And the thing here is that we see there is an investment gap to reach the SDGs. These are figures from UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And as you see, the official development assistance is quite a small part. They saw this already in 2015. If we are going to reach the Sustainable Development Goals. So what we can see now is that there are some current investments done to achieve those Sustainable Development Goals. And if we have a pretty good business as usual, we could see that the 2030 agenda could be fulfilled and achieved by the private sector with another square of innovations. But there is actually a need for so much more partnership between the development organizations and the private sector. And then if that could sort of increase very much more, we could come to possibly increase the green area here so that we can achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. But there is really a gap here still. And what UNCTAD, UN Conference on Trade and Development, what they saw already in 2015 was that we need to increase the partnering and the collaboration with the private sector. And what we can see is that this is a graph of the Greenfield project. That means the small and medium-sized enterprises and how they are engaged in this area. And what we can see there is that, unfortunately, a decline of investments now on, for instance, solar systems or new innovations in water and sanitation and so on. So there is a need now to step up and do something so that we take this decline into an increase instead of. So this is some figures that we have in front of us. So I would like to introduce the panel. Thank you. So we have Mrs. Ulrika Moder from the Assistant Secretary General at the United Nations Development Programme. Over here, applaud for her. And we have Patrick Ståhlgren. He's from SIDA, Swedish Innovation and Development Agency, International Development Agency Corporation. Yes, and he's the manager for innovation and new methods at the Swedish at SIDA. And new partnership innovations. And then we have Josefin Sundqvist, Secretary General at the Global Foundation, LM International. Läkarmissionen, you are a PhD in Development Cooperation Studies and the innovations actually in their roles. Thank you. And then we have Morten Björk, who is representing the Urban Tech Sweden and the network, the private network Electricity. And you are there coordinating and looking at how the innovations can go into the market more. And then we have Jan Furuvall from the Swedish East African Chamber of Commerce, facilitating matchmaking of key stakeholders in the innovation system for project development in East Africa. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the topic we have for today is building resilience in cooperation with private sector in developing inclusive off-grid or gridless solutions. So I would like to first ask Ulrika here at UNDP, what is in a nutshell, a little bit on what would you say that you do in this respect when it comes to working with inclusive innovations to build resilience together with private sector?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know UNDP, just a quick snapshot. We're covering 170 member states, and we have one of the broadest mandates within the UN system. We're working with everything from addressing increasing poverty as we see it now, but also increasing inequality, decreasing trust in societies. We have a very strong mandate on democratic governance, rule of law, and human rights, and I'll mention in that also in relation to the enabling environment that we're discussing, because we are supporting the building of institutions needed to actually drive sustainable investments. But we also work in the majority of conflict-ridden countries, and that was also mentioned, that we need to see how to drive investments also to these countries that become an increasing number and increasingly protracted crisis. And then, and this is perhaps not so much known to many people, we are actually the UN entity doing most of the work on the ground with regards to climate change and biodiversity. So a wide mandate, and we are trying to look for system solutions and really using our broad presence, but also our broad mandate in that regard. We have even been asked by member states to find integrated solutions to these wicked problems that many communities, people and countries are facing. And then looking at development finance, we had also the task throughout COVID to accompany countries and assess the socioeconomic consequences of the vaccine inequity and also other situations that we have seen with regards to increasing debts and other problems that we also now see countries face in relation to the consequences of the invasion of Ukraine. And we have then been looking at how we can drive impact investments, development finance, and you were alluding to the need to look at the new figures, because throughout the past years we have seen a decrease of foreign direct investments. And actually, while ODA is a very small portion of what is actually needed to make the sustainable development goals a reality in countries, it has been traditionally the most reliable source. And hence, we are also from the UN quite concerned with regards also a decrease of ODA, but also I would say the quality of ODA with regards to the long-term enabling environment that needs to be in place, institution building and so on. That is actually what many times investors or the private sector ask for them then to take the risk to do what is needed in these environments. That goes for local investors and companies, and that goes for international investors and companies.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much. We have as a theme here inclusiveness as well. So I would like to just also clarify that. Josephine, could I just ask you how you would define inclusive innovation?
Yes, often in development sector we use a lot of concept and buzzwords, and these change, every year. But if I would say what is inclusive innovation, I would bring up 5 points. The first is we give more influence to developers, those who actually live and face humanitarian crisis and poverty. They know best what type of products they need in a refugee camp. So they must be given influence in what they actually need. So more influence to developers. And I was recently in South Sudan in an internally displaced people's camp with women. And I spent time with these women, and they built up their own camp. They built up the houses because they knew how they wanted to live there. They brought the materials. They worked as entrepreneurs, setting up their own camp. And developers and those facing humanitarian crisis have more innovation power than we dare to think or understand. Second point is to build innovation ecosystems that involves more types of actors. When you drive innovation, it should not only be large-scale investors and companies, but we need all kinds of actors on the ground. We need the local mosque, the local religious leader, we need the innovator, we need those who sit on capital, we need the tech company, we need everyone to come together, and there it should not matter your size, your sector hat, or your yearly turnover. It's your relevance for the innovation and the solution. That's what should matters. The third component of an inclusive innovation is about being adaptive and contextual. We have to see that we cannot have the same innovations for all countries. If you, for example, construct a cup for girls who have menstruation, that can work in some countries, but in some countries it's going to be a taboo to have a menstrual cup. Then you need a sustainable pad. And then you have to know, social norms, which product, so to be adaptive and contextual. 4 is to also dare to think small scale, but also scaling capacity, so we can transfer when it actually works for more context, and there are also a lot of off-grid solutions. I was also recently in Sudan, and you know, there was a coup there in November, and for us at LM International, it's our biggest country where we work, and there are few companies that drive internet solutions for the country, and all these things were shut down after the coup, so no one could talk to each other on regular networks. But we had satellite phones. So we had also solar-driven batteries for the satellite phones. So we could talk to our local partners in Sudan, we could talk to our own staff on the ground, because we were not dependent on one single telecom system. The last but not least is to actually have more sort of impact and demand-driven innovation. It's easy when we, have products as small and medium companies in Sweden to think, I'm going to choose 3 countries where my product is going to be, presented. But it has to be demand-driven from the people who are actually going to buy the product, so it can tap into real financial markets. So we need more connection between suppliers and those who actually stand for the demand. So I would say those are...
All right, that was quite a lot within the notion inclusive. Thank you. So Patrick, now we heard Ulrika talking about how UNDP is working with inclusive innovations together with the private sector. How would you say that you build response, resilience and inclusive innovation within SIDA in your work together with the private sector?
Thank you very much. I think, number one, we're very good at choosing our partners. So we work a lot with UNDP, and we work a lot with civil society organizations, including LM International, which is a fantastic network where we want to be facilitating, sometimes financing, sometimes coming with ideas, bringing our network. So this is partnering up with other actors that have the same type of goals. Increasingly, we're also working directly towards supporting the private sector and innovators in different ways, sometimes directly, sometimes more indirectly. But I would say number one, it's our different partnerships that we work on. Number two is that we always apply a systems approach, and you've heard that both from Ulrika and from Josephine already, which means that there is not one single silver bullet out there that is going to solve the problem. Ulrika talked about governance. It's extremely important. Somebody said once that what is a natural catastrophe in one context is a summer breeze, more or less, in another, because you can have a resilient system that picks up the consequences for nature and humanity in completely different ways. So in so many countries, we, if you like, are making choices. They are socially and politically constructed catastrophes, rather, or at least equally to the amount that they are naturally driven. And we have to keep that in mind, because that also gives us a large room now to act. So having a systems-based approach where we work on governance, where we work on financing, sharing risks, but also creating bravery, so that people in the private sector, in civil society, can work proactively and take risk. And that is my third point. We help different actors to share the risk, so that when they engage, and it doesn't always work out, we can be a backstop, and we can help share that risk, and we can help others go further. So I would say these are some of the things that we do, choosing partners, working to provide systems that work long-term and also preventive, and we help other actors to share the risk exposure that they have.
Very good. Thank you so much. So interesting. So Josephine, if you could, in a nutshell, just say, you mentioned before inclusiveness and so on, you mentioned some of your work there. Are you how do you approach this area as an organization?
Yeah, what we do in LM International is that we actually base our work on the actual needs. It could be in a humanitarian context, the humanitarian needs. And then we're going to see how can we actually respond to that effectively. And then we're going to think creatively who to work on. It could be companies, could be innovators, could be government agencies, universities, researchers. But we're not going to pick those we collaborate with based on branding or who we prefer to work with. We feel that there is such an urgency with the climate crisis, with increasing humanitarian needs. So we have to lay our hats aside and to actually together solve the problem. So what we have decided in LM International is that we don't pick preference for a certain category of partner, but we let the needs decide who is best suited to work with us to respond in humanitarian and development work.
Very good, thank you. Now let's see how you are doing this in the private sector. Morten, how would you say that you work with innovative to build resilience in this area?
First of all, you can say I am a commercial arm for Urban Tech Sweden, which is a project within electricity innovation. So we work with accelerating transformation of climate-neutral cities, communities, etc. And we do that through a very inclusive approach. We do pre-feasibility studies, where we can also find this, not only that we meet the normal sustainability goals, we also do it to find it, make it financially sustainable. So we do these projects. We are, you can say, project-oriented. So we define projects, and then we invite innovation companies, technology providers, and we then take like a turnkey scope into the financial part into this.
Okay, great. And finally, Jan, at the Swedish East African Chamber of Commerce, how do you approach
the private sector?
Yeah, the resilience.
We actually represent the private sector of the Swedish SWEAC. But nevertheless, I try to reverse the question.
Yeah.
So SWEAC is a member-driven organization. All of us working there in the organization are working pro bono. So we support all the members, which are 100% commercial oriented. And for the members, they have all different prerequisites going into business development and innovation. And I can assure you, all of them working towards any development country are working in order to make it sustainable and resilient in this perspective. What we like to do on behalf of our members is to work together with both social society organization, humanitarian aid, international development agency, in order to do the risk sharing. But the sales, the work, the development will still continue to be on the responsibility of the companies. But project-wise, we believe it's most important to be on the same side and try to work together. Risk reduction for everyone, which is a key element for the members. We have both large, small and medium-sized enterprises. The large ones, they are doing large projects. They need a risk reduction in relevance to their investments. And it's the same on the small and medium-sized.
Great.
We will come back to it later about how to include the small and medium-sized when we have the Zanzibar example. So.
Yeah, we could do that. And I actually think we should jump just into the field and see, could we see an example of a project that has been created with a cooperation here, actually, within this project that we are building this event from, Swash and Grow. Morten, you have, please tell us a little bit more on what you have done outside Zanzibar in Tanzania.
Well, I'm not only representing Urban Tech Sweden here. I'm also an entrepreneur. I'm the founder of EcoBarge. So EcoBarge, we provide fully operational and finance climate resilient, sustainable on-off-grid mobile solutions, like platforms for communities, entrepreneurs. It doesn't matter if we are in Ukraine or Gotland or in Africa. So we integrate and operate plants and deliver electricity, energy storage, grid frequency balancing, charging infrastructure, potable water, fish schooling and processing that we will discuss here in Zanzibar. So EcoBarges, they are floating, modular, scalable, mobile, which mitigates risk as we can move them if there is a climate or a geopolitical risk to care about, which also reduce the risk to investors. And the key thing here that we, together with the end users, we perform pre-feasibility studies, because the thing is, there's actually more money available than projects available. But the suppliers, component suppliers, they don't perform feasibilities to find the cases. And the end users, the communities, they cannot afford it. So the key is that we perform to our best of our ability, pre-feasibility studies at their own account. Sometimes, as in Zanzibar case, we are happy to receive support from Smart City Sweden, for instance. Now, through these pre-feasibility cases, we can show that we're not only meeting sustainable development goals, we also show that they are financially sustainable. And if you want to reassure long-term operation maintenance, and as we do, through build, own, operate, and even ability to transfer to the local community the ownership of the assets, so they can continue to reduce work with gender equality, poverty release, etc. The key is to just identify the business case. And I say business case because, as you say, the local communities, wherever we go, doesn't matter in Gotland or Africa, are the best experts in their own needs. So through the pre-feasibilities, we really do this. So if it's something I really want to call out for, the finance for pre-feasibility study can be like 0.5% of a project, but if you only do that, the market, the suppliers, everything take care of itself. And this way we can also act as pilot plants, test bed for innovations, European, Nordic, Swedish, in this way.
Thank you. Let me just also see now if this project, we have actually online what they say about this project in Tanzania. We have Mr. Matthew Saus, I believe, on Zanzibar. Hi, Matthew. Is everything fine down there?
How are you?
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on this very important week.
Thank you. Great. So please tell us. You have met with the EcoBarge project here, and how would that benefit your situation on Zanzibar at the moment, and the local communities?
Okay. In listening to the discussion so far, there's so much to unpack. But if I can give it a little bit of context, currently we're actually in the tourism business, and we have a foundation that works very closely with the government and with the local community. So we are very grassroots. We work with just everybody on the ground. And at the moment, using our history, which is 15 years on Pemba Island in Zanzibar, we've been able to get really close to the government and to communities to put to them different projects and different ways to build a brighter, more sustainable future for Pemba specifically. We're in a very, very remote area in the middle of rural communities. Jobs, education, well-being has been part of our business from the beginning. And including all stakeholders in what we're doing has been critical to our work. So to give context to the EcoBarge project and to innovation and to sustainability and profitable businesses, we came up with a concept of building what started as an ecological corridor. Now, Pemba Island is 65 kilometers long. And what started our work with conservation brought us to thinking about this ecological corridor all the way along the west coast of Pemba. The government of Zanzibar, much to our delight, the president inaugurated a new ministry in the government of Zanzibar called the Ministry of Blue Economy. And our idea was to partner with this ministry and with the government. We've been always very close to the government, but to have a structure and a framework to work within the government really closely has been a real benefit to us at the moment. So we are working on what we call the Blue Economy Corridor. Now, the blue economy is extremely important to local communities and rural coastal communities because it looks at the actual economies on the ground, and it focuses on profitability and sustainability of these local businesses and these local economies, and tourism being one of them, fishing being another one of them. But in all of, if you imagine this corridor all the way along the west coast, what our idea is to populate this corridor and this space with sustainable projects.
Okay.
That are based on local community needs. So when it comes to those economies, the EcoBarge and infrastructure is essential, because for us to build those economies, we need the infrastructure, and it needs to be off-grid. And that's where the EcoBarge project comes in.
All right.
Project innovation like EcoBarge are critical to what we're trying to do.
Thank you so much. Interesting to hear also. So the EcoBarge has opened up some, and how did this happen? Was that when did you meet those guys? Yes.
You can say as part of the Social and Growth project, we, and as supported by Smart City Sweden in this case, we performed a pre-feasibility. We actually came to discuss with Matthew and his partners and the Quanini how to turn a resort into an eco-resort. But when we got there, spoke with the local community, the local fishermen who sail in canoes and fish with hooks, we realized that 35% of the fish caught is destroyed because of lack of cooling. And through the pre-feasibility, we were able to establish that it takes us 12 months to build a plant. We can operate it for 25 years, and the investors will have their money back within 6 months. This way enabling us to do build, own, operate, transfer to the end users, where we then through floating solar and cooling of fish can establish. And what's happening now, really delighted what's happening now in the local community, that they are now starting their own project company for trading fish in a sustainable way, not to increase the fishing pressure, but to reduce it, and in order to really work in line with blue economy. So everything is completely sustainable.
So it's an example a little bit on an example of how would you say, Ulrika, on the inclusiveness here, and on your perspective, your approach on a example like this?
Yeah. No, perhaps as I started off also giving that kind of overview of UNDP as a global organization and how we work with this, I also want to say what everyone else has said, and that is how can we really support local solutions, but then use also the worldwide networks that we have also to scale some of these solutions where we see that economies can actually benefit from whether local or national. And here's, of course, where UNDP can play an important role. I also wanted to comment on the fact that sometimes, because I said finance is a problem, and it is right now, but also one of the problems is, of course, that there is a deficit of bankable projects. And I wanted to take the opportunity to do a pitch for the national determined contributions. These are the plans that countries are developing to showcase their commitment to the Paris Agreement. And there you would find energy at the heart of 100% of these NDCs across. UNDP has supported 120 countries to develop their NDCs. And of course, a lot of off-grid solutions and new innovative ways of working. So what we are trying to do from UNDP's side is to turn these NDCs not only into strong commitments with regards to mitigation and adaptation measures, but actually to turn them into investment plans and see how we can drive investments, but also then support the development of local bankable projects, and then use the worldwide network also to spread the best ideas in South-South and also triangular cooperation.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you. And Patrick, could you?
I think we have a great common understanding of what's needed here, the scaling aspect. And bringing it up to throughout the ecosystem, particularly the problem that you bring up and that you emphasize on bankable projects. I think this is one of the issues we've somehow neglected since you showed the UNCTAD reports from 2014. We've been very good together with UNDP and others in the UN family and our bilateral work to build institutions that foster a more favorable environment for investors. We have a lot to do still, but we're on that agenda. We also have come a little bit on the way in terms of working with investors. We are far behind, I would say, on working with enterprises, entrepreneurs to build bankable projects. At CEDA, we're talking increasingly about this triangle that you can see: institutions, investors, and corporations. And we need to have all three of them to actually get solutions to the SDG agenda. You can't solve a problem by just throwing money on it, or you can't solve a problem by just having the right regulation or institutions, especially not in some of the countries where we're working. You have to have entrepreneurs that are out there, that are talking to the end users, the clients, that are solving problems in a very iterative way on a daily basis, and then work together in this ecosystem. That's when you can actually have some impact on the agenda. So it's really a collaborative approach, but we need to pay more attention to people on the far end of this because we've neglected that aspect, I think, too far and too long. What would be the most important issue for you guys
for doing more projects like this?
I think I would just like to stay a little bit on the project and say Sveak's role in
yes,
this
you could do that.
part. Also, hello Matthew, nice to meet you. I know you have been a substantial part of the project. For Sveak, we are trying to connect, facilitate contacts, and the project mentioned by Morten, the Swash and Grow. In this project, we needed a showcase. And first we tried with Rwanda, but we were not able to organize it in a proper way. And then one of our members, Sandrek company, was contacted from EcoBarge, which is a member company, just mention it. And they started to discuss this opportunity, and also together with the resort led by Matthew and the Kwanini Foundation, which is also, I think you're ahead of this as well, Matthew, if I'm correctly. Yeah, thank you. And together they created this project and asked for money from Smart City Sweden to get the pre-feasibility study. Then everything went on hold. And in that case, we have quite good relationship with both private sector in Tanzania through the Tanzanian Chamber of Commerce, but also the Embassy of Tanzania in the Nordics. And the ambassador was most kind to open up this on the central government and actually support the local government to give the necessary information to go forward. So this is kind of work done by Sveak, is facilitating these kind of projects.
Yeah. And what would be the key thing for you at private sector to do more of these kind of projects? What do you need from the
Well, I mean, we should understand that the key thing is to be able to secure, not to send a desalination machine. We need to secure that we can educate, operate, maintain during the lifetime of the desalination machine. So we need to facilitate business model that creates build, own, operate, and also transfer of the assets to the end users when the investors made their money, because we should understand, investors, they want finished business case presented to them that are being done feasibility studies to prove the business case, including the technology, and that they're meeting the sustainable development goals. If you look into the individual component suppliers, they don't support the end users with the feasibility study. They want to sell a pump. So you can say in Sweden, we are very good in creating drills, but actually the end users, they need holes financed. So I think that what we're discussing here is to mitigate risk through, for instance, Swedish export credits. If we talk about, but the key thing, the key starting point is to do the pre-feasibility together with the local community and engage the local community in defining their own hurdles, their own needs. From that, we can build everything. So if one thing we should do, it is this one. The rest solves by itself. And we also need to be able to do ourselves the turnkey capability. We can do that mobile, floating. We don't use land. That can be used for other stuff. And if there is too big risk, we had, like, for instance, in Basra in Iraq, we can move out for a bit, and then we can move in again.
Okay, we only have 2 minutes actually left of the whole event, and we have Josephine hasn't been saying so much yet on this approach. You can say some short, and then Patrick as well wanted to reflect on this, and then we'll need to close.
Yeah, just to be quick. I think we should start talking actually more about localization of aid, even when it comes to private sector and the role of private sector in development cooperation. Because now that discourse is so limited to the role of civil society, but in a very similar way and with the same type of logic, we have to adopt that discourse in private sector's role in development. The other thing I want to say is that in this case, what is really good is that you spent 15 years on Pemba. And I think it has a point. It takes time. So you have to be patient. You have to be committed. You cannot, come as an entrepreneur, investor, whoever, innovator, and think you're going to solve the problem for a community just by showing up and selling your product. We need this sort of integration into the local innovation ecosystem. Third thing, you were in close dialogue with the ministry. And I think that's what we see when we work in many countries. If it's solutions in the water sector, we always engage with the Ministry of Water. So we have to have this type of integration, even if we may not have institutional building as our primary target. it should still be a component in the work.
Thank you. And Patrick, you wanted to... Please, just...
Yes, I would say that I think that some of you are quite overwhelmed right now by all of the information and all of the perspectives that we give you. But I would like to just push for one final message, which I think stands for all of us, that yes, we have done a lot of good things, and yes, we have a lot of nice tools, but number one, most important for us, we want to listen and we want to learn more about the real needs of the private sector to engage, to innovate, and to create relevant problems for the SDG agenda. And that's why we are, all of us, having 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we really want to practice that. From SIDA's side, I really pledge that that's the approach that we are having in our approach to work more with the private sector, to work more with investors. And I think this is very, very important to get to the complexity of getting the right type of projects and then bringing them up to scale.
You wanted 10 seconds as well.
Seconds, yeah. Now, just an invitation for you to go to look at UNDP's website and look for the accelerator labs. There you will find a lot of inspiring examples of local innovation and how to create an enabling environment at the local level. And also that when we had a call together with Norrsken that wanted to do impact investments in startups, more than 50% of those that we called for globally, because UNDP was part of vetting, actually came from the African continent. So there are a lot of really great ideas out there. We just need to find an ecosystem how to support it the best way.
Thank you so much. And a big applaud for the panel. And all of you who have been wanting to ask questions, there is a possibility, because now there are wraps and drink. Water, mineral water and drink on the back of this tent. You are invited for wraps and drinks. Please give us all your questions at that place. Now it's the next session. Thank you so much.